All right, what are we doing? Let's do the media texture stuff first. All right, so I'm just gonna start Unreal. There's nothing special about this project. It's pretty much a brand new project. I am recording. Okay, good. So one of the things I like to do when I first start a project that I'm going to do compositing with in Unreal is turn on, this is a little sacrilegious because I talked so much crap about Apple last week, but I like their codec. I like to turn on the ProRes codec in settings, plugins. It's not on by default unless you do the video template in Unreal. I just like to render out quick videos rather than having to convert the image sequences. You don't need to turn that on if you don't want to render out ProRes. But today, I'm going to show you something rendered out. So I'll just activate it now. When you enable a plugin in Unreal, it's going to ask you to restart. So I like to do that in the beginning, get all the restarting out of the way. All right. Now, what is it that we want to do today? We are going to bring Miss Miley, who's already been keyed out. You're welcome. We will key out something after we take a break. But for right now, we're just going to get video footage into Unreal Engine and put it on the timeline so I can show you what to do. Now, first thing is first. This is already keyed out. You don't need to worry about that right now. First things first, though, is that we are working with image sequences in this class. Okay? Image sequences, not MP4 files, that sort of stuff. Your renders, your final renders are video files, obviously. But in visual effects, even not with Unreal, when you're working with a 3D program or After Effects or something like that, you should work with image sequences so that you have one image for every single frame, depending on whatever your frame rate is, of video. In Unreal Engine, this is incredibly important because if you don't use image sequences, things are going to get out of sync. And syncing is just a little important with visual effects. It's the most important thing. If it's not synced, it's not going to look right. Okay? So I already have taken the liberty of making this an image sequence for you. So in this case, that's already done. How do you make image sequences? With your video program. You take any video, turn it into an image sequence. What file types should you use? In this case, these are PNGs. PNGs are okay. Ideally, the professional thing to use would be an EXR file. We're not going to get into EXR files in this class. It's a little too scary and will eat up tons of hard drive space. PNGs are fine for our demo right now. Why not JPEGs? Yeah, but what's a more important reason when talking about green screen? No alpha channel, right? Yeah. If we want to put a hole in the background, we can't do that with a JPEG. It's got to be something that holds an alpha, like a PNG or a Targa file or a TIFF file or an EXR file, a DPX file. EXR files are kind of the professional, but we're too soon for that right now. All right, so we have our image sequence. It's already been keyed out for you. We're ready to start with Unreal. So again, in this class, we assume a lot of Unreal knowledge already to start with, or that you're excited enough that you will figure that out on your own. So apologies if this is your first time opening Unreal. You got some work to do on your own. One thing I will say that maybe even those of you that have used Unreal before maybe don't know, if you go to settings in the right, engine scalability settings, it's particularly useful maybe for the people that are just like stubborn with their MacBook Pros and insist on using them. You can turn down, or even if you have a weaker laptop, you can turn down the quality here from Epic to high, medium, or low, everything will start to look pretty crappy as you lower down the quality, but hey, at least your frame rate will not be 5 frames a second. Another useful thing is if you click on this little hamburger icon in the top left of this window here and you go to show FPS, this will show your frame rate. Ideally, you're topped out at 60 frames a second. This is anything less than 20 frames, especially when it's a blank world. Ooh, that machine's, you're gonna hear the fans kick on, right? Whew. It's gonna be tough. But all right, let's start doing something then. So video textures are called media textures or media plates in Unreal Engine. So I'm going to create one. First thing I'm going to do in my content browser here, I'm going to just add a new folder. Pretty straightforward. Again, this is being recorded, so if I'm moving too fast, you can always refer back to that. If you have any pressing questions, don't be afraid to interrupt them. Then I'm just creating a new folder, and we don't import all of those PNGs in Unreal Engine. Maybe if you are familiar with another gaming engine, perhaps like Unity or something like that, maybe that's something that you would do, but that's not how this works with Unreal Engine. Don't do that. It's going to import, perhaps if you have EXR files, gigabytes and gigabytes of unnecessary file copying into your Unreal project. I'm going to click the big Add button again, and this time go to Media and go to Image Media Source. Would it be more helpful if I turned off all the lights? You can tell me. You don't need me to. Nobody can see anything. I just don't know. Image Media Source. Image Media Source for EXR image sequences. That's what we're going to use. Image Media Source. I'm going to call this IMS for Image Media Source, and I'll just call this cat. Good naming conventions, right? Very, very distinct. I'm going to double click this. It's going to open up this window. And over here on the right, it says sequence path. I'm going to click the little dots and then go and browse to where that unzipped folder of cat riding pictures is. I'm going to select the first one, just the first one, and click open. I'm also going to set the frame rate to 30. It's an image sequence, so frame rate doesn't matter so much, but I'm just going to pick 30. And then if you want to make sure everything works and you have the right directory and everything, you can click the open button up top. And it should open. Might look a little weird around the edges where the alpha is. That's all right. This is just a preview. The point is that you want to see the video play. Ideally at its proper frame rate. Video textures are pretty intense to do in gaming engines, so your machine might bog down. But one of the benefits of, it's funny, we use a gaming engine, but we talk about rendering with Unreal Engine. When we render things out, it doesn't even matter if you have the slowest machine, it will render. It just might take longer to render. Assuming you haven't smashed the laptop or thrown it out the window because your frame rate is 5 frames per second while you're building your world. Okay. Click Save. Save little floppy disk in the top left. And we can close this window down. Never to be seen again. All right, cool. So we have that. We could just drag this straight into the world and it would show up, but that's not what we're going to do. We're going to go to the Add button again, and we're going to go to Media, Media Player. It's like this little television icon. It's going to pop up this little box that says, hey, do you want to have a media texture as well? Yes, we do. Otherwise, we're going to have to create that ourselves. Click OK. I'm going to call this MP for Media Player, cat. guess I could click on this and rename this. It's a MP, call it MT for media texture. But maybe I'm getting too crazy with my naming conventions. See, that's famous last words. Do I really need to rename it? Whatever. Then an hour later, there's like 5,000 files that you're all disorganized. Okay, that's good, that's good. While we're here, it's a good time to do the public service announcement about saving. When you import assets or create assets in Unreal like we've just done here, you say my computer just crashed right now or Unreal crashed. Some of this stuff would not be saved. Not that big of a deal. I haven't done that much, but you should save. If it has this little asterisk on the file, whether it's a texture or a static mesh or a skeletal mesh or whatever, if it has a little asterisk, that means it hasn't been saved. Unlike Unity, Unreal uses a proprietary format. Everything that you import into Unreal creates this file called a UAsset file. It's not super important that you know that, but until you save, it won't do that. So let's save. There's a little button in the content browser right there. It says Save All. You can go up to File, Save All if you want to do it that way. There's a half dozen ways to do the same thing in Unreal, as well as all software. As soon as I click Save All, it's going to say, hey, you want to save this? Yes, I do. Save. Now the little asterisk is disappeared. Good to go. Now I can open this up and the stuff would be here. Saving assets, different than saving, say, this map or level or world or whatever you want to call it. These assets can be used by an infinite number of maps that I design. Just like a game has World 1, World 2, World 3. All of those are made in the same project that share the same assets. It's just they're different worlds so that they can be separated out sequentially for the player to play them in the video game. Same thing for us. All these assets can be used to design any number of worlds. Maybe you have one world in your project. Maybe you have 2. Maybe you have 1,000. It doesn't matter. The point is that all these assets can be used in there because this is the project they were imported into. Okay? When you want to save your map, you go to File, Save Current Level As, and it's going to ask you, what do you want to call this new map? I will call this new map, I don't know, L for level cat. Keeping consistency here. See, now it says up top, the map has a name. Just some simple Unreal stuff there. So we have set up the video files, but we don't have it anywhere in the world or anything like that. That's our next step. We've created a texture here, but we haven't created a material. Think of materials like paint that you paint on 3D objects. Materials explain to the gaming engine what they should look like. Is it a brick texture? Is it Miley Cyrus riding a cat? Is it shiny? Is it rough? Is it bumpy? Materials explain to the gaming engine how light should fall on the surface of an object, whatever that is. Textures are the graphic files that make the bricks in the brick material, or the picture of Miley riding the cat in that texture. We need to make a material from this texture. Half dozen ways to do the same different thing, but the easiest way, I think, is just right click on this and up top say create material. I'll just rename this M for material, cat. Being very good about my naming conventions. I totally do this every single day when you're not watching. And now I have a material. Materials are green, textures are red. So now I can open up this material. I'll double click it. This is a preview of the material. If you've ever used a 3D software before, this should be fairly familiar. If you've ever made materials in Blender, there's node graphs, right? Unreal uses a node graph to make materials as well. It's not something that we're going to spend a ton of time with. Most of our materials in this class will be already made. This is the one instance where that is not the case, but it's an incredibly simple material. You might look at this and be like, yo, this is black. Where's the picture, right? Another thing that is good to do is these little buttons down below allow you to see it on a different surface. So I'm going to click the one in the middle for the plane, single-sided plane, because that's what I'm putting her picture on. But it's black. There's nothing there. Well, that's because the video is not playing. And unless I go ahead and open this up, which I can, you don't have to do this part. You can just watch. So I open this up and click play. Now it pops up. We haven't created the mechanism yet for it to play. We'll get there. But first, I'm creating the material. But now that I have picture here, I can do the other stuff. If yours is black still, you can still do this other stuff just while we're here. All right, so it's not keyed out, right? The green is black, that's cool, but I haven't told Unreal that this material has an alpha channel yet. This PNG file, what this texture is, has an alpha channel. So I'm going to drag out with left click from alpha and plug this into opacity. There's opacity and there's opacity masks. They'll both be blacked out right now. That's all right. Opacity is for translucency, and opacity mask is a much more harsh-edged type of masking. Computationally, opacity mask is very cheap, and translucency is quite expensive. But we want to use opacity because the fine edges of the cat's fur are semi-translucent, right? They're not hard-edged. Actually, you know what? Let me just show you the difference while we're here. If you click on the big main node, you will be able to change what type of shading and blend mode the texture has. We want to change the blend mode to, well, I guess I'm going to show you masked first, although ultimately we want it to be translucent. This is masked. Look at the harsh edge on the cat's ears here. Not great, right? It's basically like a black and white mask, a 0 or 1. It's very hard edge cutout. Good for like icons and sprites and that sort of stuff. Not so good with full motion video. Oh, that's already done. Sure. No, not at all. In opacity mask, it doesn't exist. Oh, not, yeah, right. I mean, it kind of does, but it's not. Yeah, but it's still very harsh. So now I'm going to do opacity. Notice one is grayed out when the other one's not. So now I'm going to change this to translucent. Now it's very, very fine detailed, right? Just like in After Effects, pretty much. Or exactly like that. This is another reason that we would do our final compositing back in After Effects or Fusion or Nuke, is that it looks better. Like the video footage and the key would look better rather than doing it in Unreal. Unless you're doing like a live Twitch show where you're broadcasting live out of Unreal, you should recomposite it in an actual compositing program. You'll just have more control unless you don't care about the fidelity, which, it's fine. Another thing that we want to do is we want to change the shading model. And the way that you get this stuff is by clicking on this big node here. Change the shading model to unlit. Right now, this texture is lit by my sun here as I move it around the scene. You see it gets a little darker, gets a little lighter. It's not that big of a difference, but basically the texture is lit by the lights in the world. This is video footage. I know she's not that interestingly lit. It's pretty all around, but I don't want Unreal's lighting to affect her because I want the lighting that was shot in the scene when she was filmed, right? So in that case, I'm using the shading model called Unlit that tells Unreal that there is no, don't light this texture. Don't use lights on it. And you can see it all change to black. That's because base color turns off and emissive color turns on. We want to drag RGB to emissive color instead of base color. You can delete wires with Alt and clicking on them too. It's not that important. She might look super bright and stuff like that and not like how she did in your actual shoot. That's okay. That's because Unreal has a very aggressive grading to it called a tone mapper. We're going to turn that off, but not in here. We're not going to turn it off. I'm not sure you can turn it off in here. No. We'll turn it off in the world. All right, when we have this, we're good. We can click save and we can close this down, or we can put this tab back up here, whatever you want to do. So now we have a material that we can put on something. We put this material on the ground. Maybe not. It's not UV mapped for that. I could put her on cube. Put her on anything. Now she's on cube. But that's not super useful for us. What we use in here is planes. Not an airplane, but a geometric plane, flat surface. So I'm going to rotate this vertically. And I haven't done any world design or anything like that yet. I'm just going to drag this material up. Oop, she's tilted, so let's rotate her up. And I don't know if you want to enlarge her, you can. I guess it depends on what you want to do with it. Good enough for right now. Now, something to think about. It should be quite obvious that this does not look like this. It looks very harsh and the highlights are blown out, and you look at this and you're like, man, why are we doing video in Unreal Engine? It looks like shit, right? Yeah, it does. But I'm going to show you how to not make it look like garbage. And also, again, we're not doing our final compositing in Unreal. We're just rendering out the backgrounds, and we're going to composite in After Effects. I'm going to take pieces of art and put them behind her in After Effects. Like, imagine that this red solid is Unreal World. It's going to go behind her in After Effects in a program that is made for compositing. Not in Unreal. So it doesn't even matter if it looks bad. But still, while you're working on your world, you probably want it to look as close as possible to the final result. So I'm going to show you how to fix these things. One of these problems is caused by Unreal's eye adaptation exposure system. Eye adaptation is, you're sitting in a dark movie theater, your eyes adjust to watch the movie. Your eyes are adjusted to this room right now because our eyes are amazing. We go outside really quick and we're like, whoa. Or I turn on the lights and we're like, whoa, dude, turn on the lights. Unreal has that system as well, but it's super annoying if you're not making games. If you're making games, it's cool because your character goes from dark dungeon to outside and you get that cool real world eye adaptation effect. Not in filmmaking. It's not cool. Or I don't think it's cool. So to turn that off permanently, we're going to click on this little, the add button up top here. I don't even know what this is called. Quick add button, I guess. I thought you've been using Unreal since the 90s, dude. I don't even know what this is called. And we're going to go down to Visual Effects, Post-Process Volume. And click it. Post-process volume could be used as a volume that things happen when you enter it. Like when my character enters this post-processing volume, everything desaturates, or some sort of weird effect happens, or the color grading changes, or the brightness increases. Again, useful for games, not so useful for filmmaking. In our case, we're using this more as a global setting to, in this case, adjust the tone mapper and adjust the exposure of the world. So I'm going to click on it in the world, click on it in the outliner up in the top right, however you want to get to it. And in the details settings over here on the right, I'm not going to search through this huge mess of stuff. I bet if you added up all the time I've spent scrolling to infinite extent in the post-processing volume, it's probably a couple hours of lifetime. No joke. I'm searching for this thing called infinite extent unbound. You just type in the search infini and it will pop right up. You want to check this. That means that the stuff happens everywhere, not just inside the box. And next I'm going to type two more things we want to do. I'm going to type in exposure. And there are three settings I'm going to mess with. Metering mode, exposure compensation, and physical camera exposure. I'm going to activate all of these. I'm going to turn off physical camera exposure. Basically what that means is that, in the real world, when you adjust the aperture in your camera, it will adjust the exposure that you see on the back of your digital camera. And when you adjust the aperture or shutter speed, it adjusts the exposure. Same thing in Unreal, because Unreal's cameras work as real world cameras. But I don't want that to happen because it might confuse you. We don't really need real world apertures at this point. I want you to change metering mode to manual. And then there's a couple different ways to adjust exposure. This is the easiest for us right now. And just play with the exposure compensation. Why is nothing happening? Dun dun dun. Live demo. Which game setting? That's what I want, yes. Strange. I did check anything. No, what the heck? No, I just unchecked this for some reason. I don't know why. You want that checked. I must have just been clicking on it and making a bad joke and not paying attention. That's the thing about live demos, folks. You're guaranteed to make a fool of yourself. There's nothing more fun than watching your professors do live demos and failing. Adjust the exposure compensation until it looks much better. It's still a little contrasty though. Contrasty and saturated, much more so than this. Why don't I go back to the frame? What frame is that? I don't know. We'll look at the frames once we set up sequence. The other thing that we want to do besides the exposure is turn off the tone mapper. Now, just type in tone to, it's called tone curve. Type in tone to the post-process volume. Tone curve amount, 0. Now this is something I want you to remember. This will make your video footage that you imported look good. It will look like this in After Effects. But it makes everything else in Unreal look kind of crappy. So I would turn this off if you are bothered by how crappy your video footage looks. But I would turn it on when you're ready to render out your Unreal scene. When we're rendering out the constituent parts. Some people like it, some people don't. You can split the difference if you want. I usually turn it off because I'm doing my compositing after the fact anyways. All right. And now it looks good, but it's not moving. Cool. More steps. Are we ready for the next step? This is the second to last step. Although the second step has lots of little steps. All right, we need to use the timeline in Unreal, which is called sequencer. A lot of different ways to make a level sequence in Unreal, but I'm just going to go up to the slate up here in Unreal and go to add level sequence. I'm going to call this ls underscore cat. And it's going to open up a new tab that's empty, but it's a timeline. If you ever used a timeline in any software before, Premiere, After Effects, Photoshop has a timeline, Unity, whatever, it's the same thing. You put different tracks in here, and you can keyframe things. What I want to add to this, you click on the Add button. I want to add a media track. Adds a little media track that is empty. Click on the little plus to add media. Go to media source. Find the image media source file that we created, IMS-cat. Now it's in there. You may notice that our footage is longer than the timeline. You know, in a timeline, you have in and out points. The red is the out point. Green is the in point. I'm going to make this a little longer. You can set the in and out points with these sliders down here. And you can find the out point of the footage. How many frames is this? Ouch. 231 frames. So, oh, look at that. I guess right. 231. And I'm going to go down here and click the little red button, set the out point. Now when I scrub this, nothing happens still. Dun, dun, dun. So we have to do one more thing. Right click on it, properties, media texture. Sorry for the coughing. Sometimes I just get so worked up talking about this stuff. Click on none, and this is where we're going to find our media texture that we made. MT_cat is what I called it. Boom. Now when I slide the timeline, it should move. Great. If I hit the spacebar, it should play. You can set looping down here. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about sequencer because the video timeline. The what? I did a lot of things. The whole thing. Oh, right clicking on the track. Yeah. Properties. Sorry about that. That's all right. We can touch up on them. Sorry, I've done this tens of thousands of times, so it's like thoroughly baked in. Yeah. You mean in real life? Oh, like the focal length and stuff? You don't. I mean, yeah, you can write down the cameras in Unreal are real world properties. So if you're shooting with a 50 millimeter prime lens, then I would use that. I think unless it's a really wide lens that you're shooting with, either in Unreal or on set, I don't think most people will be able to tell personally. Yeah, I would eyeball it. But no, there is value in like using the same lens. But I think a lot of that, because she's stripped out of the context of her background, I don't think you really, unless it's a super wide lens, I don't think you really notice. Yeah, right. We don't have a camera at all right now. I thought you were gonna ask, how do you keep get the plane aligned to the camera, because that's important too, you know? Like if I'm like this, now she looks skewed. In that case, you know, that's something a little bit more advanced, but I would create a camera and then add a plane as a component of that camera. So it's always locked to the camera rather than, so wherever you drive the camera, the plane is always. Yeah, I mean, what I was going to say was if you made a camera here, you can add the plane as a component of the camera, right? So now wherever I drive, yeah, they're parented, exactly. Maybe this is what I should have did first, actually. Um, Baby steps. A couple more things, and then we're gonna take a break. I don't know why my cursor has disappeared. It's not like cursor's pretty important. Yeah, so now see wherever I move the camera, not paying attention anymore. Anyways, sleep. Where were we? So for our cases, you know, I just want you to line things up and build a world around some sort of video footage. This is pretty much your project. I haven't built a world around her or anything. I guess we could. You know, why don't we just do that real quick? I don't have any clouds in here. Oh, this is a pro tip. And remember, we're getting things from the marketplace, right? Whether they're free or if you want to buy them, that's up to you. But if you get something from the marketplace and your project doesn't pop up when you add it, pro tip, click show all projects. It's just because you're using a newer, and right now in this class we're using 5.4, which is the newest one. You're using a newer version of the engine than the asset was tested in. Just pick the most recent one, click the drop down. If you're using a super old asset, it might be way back here. Unless it's something with a lot of code, it'll be fine. Add to project. Why don't I delete the floor? Why don't I delete the volumetric clouds? Why don't I delete the whatever, that's fine for now. Let's add some clouds in. There's nothing special about this really lame world that I'm about to build. But your assignment is going to be to take some sort of video footage. Doesn't really matter to me what it is. You, not a person. I don't really care what it is, but so much that it has to have green screen. Huh? Ideally, it's not just something that you ripped from YouTube that has a perfect green screen. That's kind of lame. You can use the footage that I give you if you don't have your own. But you are what the heck is this cloud? Trying to get it in front of her. You're going to build a world around that footage. I'm also working without a cursor right now for some reason, and I don't want to unstart Unreal. For some reason, when I put my cursor over the main window, it disappears. Sometimes this happens when I have After Effects and Unreal and OBS running. I think that's why it happens. Sorry, I'm just trying to duplicate some clouds here to make a really lame world in 5 seconds. These clouds are way too big. Scale. And you probably won't have these clouds because you didn't buy them. So you use whatever assets that you want to use. Yeah, well, this is 5 seconds spent to make a world, whatever. The point of this demo is not to make a world, not to show you how to make a world. The point is to do the media texture. All right, so in Sequencer, oops, for some reason that's duplicated. In Sequencer, now I have video footage playing in a world. Now I want to render this out. To render it out, the first thing I need to do is create a camera. So I'm going to go back to this little drop down with the green plus on it again. Go to Cinematics, go to Cin Camera Actor, and you get this little window that pops up there. That's the view through your camera right now. My camera is way over here for some reason. So what I like to do, instead of using the little gizmo to move it around, I like to go to Perspective, Cin Camera Actor. Now I am the camera anywhere I move. See, it says Pilot Actor, Camera. I can drive myself around. Right now, I'm not going to show you how to make sure that you're aligned to the plane and everything like that. I just want you to eyeball it. The point of this demo is the media texture, not really much else. You just make sure, you know, this is flat video, so you kind of want to be straight on with it. Which means like your rotational value should probably be 0. But you know, you can get away with a little bit of stuff, even like this. All right, so there's my camera, but I want to animate it, which means bringing it into sequencer. So I'm going to grab it in my outliner and drag it in to my sequencer. And now I have it down here. And I can manipulate things like the transformation or the focus or the focal length, aperture, that sort of stuff. I'm just going to do an incredibly simple dolly zoom on the camera here. So I'm going to click the drop down for transform, click location. The X value is forward and back on her. So I'm going to set a keyframe here by clicking on the little plus button there and setting a keyframe on the timeline. If you've ever used keyframes before in After Effects or Premiere or any software, it's the exact same thing. And then I'm going to scrub to the end or jump to the end, and I'm going to change this value to, I don't know, just go a little bit closer to her. Now, in this case, there was some camera movement on set when this was actually recorded. The camera was on a track and it moved closer to her. Whether that matches up with, you know, the exact physics of everything, you're just going to eyeball it. Oh. It's a very surreal scene anyway, so I'm not too worried about realism in this case, for this example. So camera's moving between 2 keyframes. Beautiful. It's my masterpiece, though I prefer the rainbow version. Question? No, there is. You want to do that instead? Okay, we can do it. So right now we just have a plane in the world. Instead, what we could have done was here, let me eject from the camera. What we could have done was make the plane, instead of having the plane be its own separate object in the world, I could have made the plane a child, or in Unreal Talk, a component of the camera itself. So I could go to I could select the camera and I could click add here, and I could click the plane here and see it pops up. And now I could do all the stuff I did before, like rotating it. And then I could go back to the material for that plane. What did I call that? Oh, gotta rotate it. So the difference here, though, is that anywhere that the camera moves, that plane comes along with it because it's a child of the camera. So in this case, if I want to do that zoom in on her, if I want to get closer to her, it's not going to work, right? So I have to place the plane in the world. So I guess it depends on what you're trying to do exactly. If you have a shot that you need the camera to, if you need the plane to follow along with the camera, and you're not doing you're not getting closer or farther away from it, then this method of making a component of the camera is great. Use all the time. But if you're actually trying to get closer or farther away from the shot, putting it in the world is the easiest way to do it. You could use these things called image plates and stuff as well, but I don't want to get into it. Question? No, it's just cleaner. Yeah, it's just cleaner. And you have the benefit of being able to see then I could go into sequencer, put the plus and the component here too, so it nests it all nicely together. It's just cleaner. Especially if you want to get into like dynamic material stuff and that sort of thing. All the things I show you in this class, there's a half dozen different ways to do the same thing. I show you what I think is easiest for you to understand because most of you are fairly new at most of this stuff. Not necessarily the best way for all instances or maybe your preferred way. So if you're like, that way sucks, it's whatever, as long as it works. But good questions. It does not make sense. Oh, there's the auto key button. You can pilot it or use the gizmo. See, like, look right now, right? So there's no key. Where's my key's right here? So I'm just going to go in the middle somewhere. If I move the camera, it's not going to make a key unless I manually click the button, right? But if I click the auto key button now, if I'm piloting or not piloting it, if I move the camera, it should make a key, which it didn't. Oh, I'm not. No, but it should still be laying down a keyframe. Why is it not? Oh, maybe. Hold on. Let's go to, maybe you need to do the initial one. Where's my cursor? OBS, you're killing me. It's right there. So, oh my God, this sucks. Oh yeah, there you go. People that were horrified of the last 30 minutes, ignore the last 2 minutes of conversation. Point is that we have a camera that is actually pretty cut off now. Whoopsies. What happened? There we go. Beautiful. Now I got to show you how to render it out because that's kind of the goal of the assignment. All right, so we're happy with this. One very important thing that you need, usually this gets auto-created when you add a camera to sequencer, but never fails. There's 2 people in class that would be like, I went to render and my camera just looked like it rendered this instead of what I wanted it to, right? Because you don't have a camera cut track. Camera cut track is sort of like a director that sits in the booth at a sporting event. The basketball game, there's dozens of cameras around, people holding cameras, pointing them at the audience. On the backboard, the wide shot, the close-up shot, the audience shot, the bench shot. And there's a person in a truck saying, all right, bench camera, go. And this is the person that decides what goes out to the TV, right? That we all see when we watch the television show. That's what the camera cut track is. You could have an infinite number of cameras in your Unreal scene and chop them up in the camera cut track so that we're over here and then we're over here and we cut over here. Or you could do it with one camera too. But in order to render out, you need to have a camera cut track. And if you click on the little camera icon right here, this is what will be rendered out. So if you click this and you see this, everything should be good. you don't get the render you want, it's probably because you don't have a camera cut track. So that's my public service announcement. Guaranteed somebody will still screw it up, but that's okay. All this other stuff, if you don't know much about Unreal, these are just icons that you can get rid of by going to Game View, which is the G for game key on your keyboard. You can hit that to hide them and bring them back, or you can go to the little hamburger icon and go to Game View. They won't be in the render regardless, but if you're annoyed by them, you can turn them off. Oh, look at that gorgeous shot. Wow. All right, let's render this bad boy out. Got everything, got my camera movement. Squinty cat eyes there. I'm going to click on the clackboard, or the slate, to open up the media render queue. And this is where we render. So I'm going to click on settings, which is usually called unsaved config unless you saved one. And I'm going to render this out as, ProRes. Remember, I turned that setting on. If you don't have ProRes option, because you didn't turn the plugin on. So you could render out as a JPEG sequence or a PNG sequence, whatever. EXR sequence once we talk about that stuff. But for interests of time, I'm just going to render it out as ProRes. And I'm going to turn off JPEG or just hit delete and get rid of it. I don't need to render out as 4444. LT is fine for this. This is just, demo. Deferred rendering, we're all good with this stuff right now. We're not going to talk about stencil layers yet. Output. It's where you choose your resolution. And this is where you choose you want it to be saved out to. The default is in saved movie renders in your project directory. So wherever you made it when you created the Unreal Engine project. In this case, for me, T Unreal Engine project / whatever the project's called. If you want to put it somewhere else, this is your opportunity to browse to another folder. I'm just going to keep it there. You know what? Actually, I'll add on, just say cat at the end of that string. So I'm going to use this project all year, so we might as well stay organized, right? Cat, you know what? Cat 01. There might be more. Accept. Moment of truth. Render. You may or may not need to compile shaders. This may be painfully slow depending on your computer's speed. It's always funny. We use Unreal Engine and then we have to render. Render is pretty fast, but could be slow. Since I consolidated this class, I don't get to talk about all my real-time rendering versus traditional rendering stuff. Fun factoid, you guys know the original movie Avatar. You had me in class before we talked about this product. Original movie Avatar, not the sequel. Original movie Avatar, I think, came out in 2009 or something like that ish. Stereoscopic 3D film, lots of visual effects. How many hours do you think it took to render that film? For context, the original Toy Story, I think 1995, first feature-length animated film, computer animated film. Toy Story took a month to render. Avatar now it's rendering. If this does not show you what you want to see, you probably don't have a camera cut track. This is what's actually rendering. So, yeah, if this is all black for some reason, you messed up. All right, then it rendered out. So the original Avatar, how long? Guess. We hear two guesses. 3 months. 3 years. Orders of magnitude off. 1 billion hours, which is 65,000 years or something like that. James Cameron has been working on it a long time. Well, that's just on a single processor. So if you spread it out on a render farm, they got the rendering time to a month. But still, crazy. He's building out all of his own custom gear. This is like, he is nuts, but like mad scientist nuts. Pretty cool. 14,000? Oh, 114,000. Oh, wow. This is when did it, right, on a single, not, they're using like over 100,000 processors spread out over like 30,000 machines on, lots. You can look. I have the stats somewhere. Maybe I'll post them into the Discord. But yeah, I've got it down to a month. What is this called? No, not mocap. This isn't mocap. MRF. There we go. Saved. I could imagine that. I actually, believe it or not, I'm going back and watching a lot of old films that I missed out on because now I have kids and we have movie nights. The original Shrek looks horrible by today's standards. Oh my God, I can't even believe that. Like, I don't know. There's something. Maybe, yeah, sure. Okay. You can. It's terrible, and the texture quality is horrible. Sure. No, I have not. Okay. Sure. Right. Incredible. Yeah, I mean, production value increases across lots of different things. Well, spoiler alert. Wow. In the original Lion King? Really? I guess that makes sense because that would be insane hand painted. Right. Yeah, on that technology, that would slow things way down. Wow. Right. Wow, that's incredible. All right, y'all. At the end of the road, there is a MOV file that is our. It's really blown out in VLC for some reason, but ta-da! And this is your mission for your homework is to render out a video file. If you're using ProRes, convert that to an MP4, upload it to YouTube, post the link on your blog. All the details are on the syllabus, which we'll look at the end of class too. But that is kind of the mission statement for you. Okay? A lot of stuff. Let's take a break and then talk about a lot more stuff. All right? Hello. So my sister is and then I was like, let me see the other one. And then you one, yeah, but it was one just you? This is almost bigger than the laptop. Okay, so there's a lot of possible points of failure. Let's go through them one at a time. That works. That all looks all right. You're in sequencer. Probably don't have this set. How do I right click on? How do I right click? Oh, there's a mouse. Yeah. Right click, go to properties. Oh, you did that. You have multiples? Well, let's try. Let's look at this. Let's look at this. Did you make the media player separately from? No, I didn't do that.
I think it's a very
Sequencer. What? No, I'm not naming things right now. See, I'm just racing through this. You have a bunch of files that are poorly named. That's all good. Let's make the material from here. That's all good. Just Is this? Where is it? Which one is this? Not finding this. I'm gonna do everything from the beginning. Let's go. What is going on? Oh, I know. Yeah. No, it shouldn't be why. Oh. I mean, it could be one. Selected image sequence will not get packaged. That should be. It's just black. Well, it's frozen for you. It won't even be frozen for me.
And I fixed it. She helped me fix it.
What happened?
I chose M2 instead of I don't remember.
We did both.
Oh. Tomorrow.
Using the media player, shuffle, play on open, play, keep you looping. Sure. Let's play. Cool. See?
I don't know. I did that. And they thought,
Material, but it's not sequence. Well, now I have so many of these that I don't know which one's which. It's gonna work this time. No, it's not. Oh, hold on. I don't think I put the right material on. Uh-oh. There's too many. Now it's gonna work. I didn't do anything. Did? I don't know. I mean, obviously there was something that was not right, but I couldn't find anything off the top of my head. Now everybody gets to hear us figure out and pause the recording. All right, we're back. Keying. This has already been keyed out, so we're not going to use that. There are the files that I sent you on Discord. In that big zip file. You'll find these files in there. That's what I'm using here. These are compressed MP4 files from some online tutorial. You do not want to key compressed MP4 files. We can go into detail on like the numbers and zeros and ones and that sort of technical stuff. Keying MP4 files, you can do it, but ideally you want high resolution color depth images to be able to get the fine nuanced detail in the hair and stuff like that. I'll talk a little bit more about that next week, but in the interest of doing the demo right now, we're just going to use what we have. Okay. Think of it like taking a JPEG into Photoshop versus your camera raw file. You know, there's limits with color information. As visual effects artists, we need lots of color information to get good keys and remove her from the background. But let's start from scratch. So, you know, this is not an After Effects class. We use After Effects, but it's not an After Effects 101 class. So if some of this is difficult for you, let me know and I'll point you in the right direction. But I'm going to create a new composition from this footage. Compositions are sort of like sequences in Premiere, if you're more familiar with that. And I'm going to get the key light effect over here in the effects window. There are other keying plugins for After Effects that might do a better job than Keylight, but Keylight is good 9 times out of 10. So this is the Keylight effect. You basically just go right down the list. First, select the key color. Click the little eyedropper tool. Drop it on the color that you want to get rid of. Where should I drop it? Any ideas where I should drop it? What would be a good spot? Up here? Over here? Over here? I'm just going to keep saying over here until somebody says something. Here. Why? Why not up here? Because who cares about up here, right? The most important part is right next to her head, right? I mean, if she didn't move, I only really need green screen right here. I can cut out a piece of paper or fabric and just put green behind it right here. But she is going to move, so I need this coverage over here in case she moves over there. So yeah, you're going to want to select next to the subject. Is it going to be perfect? No. See, already, it's not perfect. It's noisy. And on transparency, it doesn't really look that bad. But when I look at it on black, or if I put if I put something else behind her, you can't even really tell there too bad. And you can see a little bit of the noise. There's some noise still. I think it's very visible on black. Maybe less so on the projector than on my screen. It's good to look on a good screen too. But I want to get rid of this noise. So I'm going to select the footage, And what I like to do, everybody has their own quirks, but this is kind of my way and it's the way I like to teach it. So this is what I'm going to show. I like to go to the view menu here where it says final result. And there's a couple things I like to look at. I like to change this to status first off. This is a very aggressive look at the key. The white pixels here are fully opaque. The black pixels here are fully translucent or transparent. And the gray pixels are somewhere in between. Remember, opacity is a range from fully opaque to fully translucent. Ideally, I want this background to be completely black, and I want the edges around her hair to be grayish because they're semi-translucent, and then I want her to be white, fully opaque. I'm going to start to play around with some settings. I'm just going to go right down the list here. Screen gain first. So I will adjust this to kind of clean up a lot of the background. I don't want to crank this too much, and maybe I already did. I just want to clean up most of the background. I'm not too worried about this. You had said lighting, right? So if your lighting is not super even on your green screen, like in this case, you're going to end up with maybe some vignetting around the edges. But again, I don't care about those edges because I could manually mask those out, just like draw a square or an ellipse or some sort of polygon around her and get rid of that stuff. The point is, if you spend your time trying to dial in settings to get rid of this and have this also look good, you're going to, in order to get rid of this, this is going to look less ideal than it could. Right? Whereas if you just manually mask that out, you can concentrate on just the area that matters, which is where her hair is. Screen balance. This is setting the variation between the opaque and translucent pixels. It also makes for horror films. I'm gonna find, usually I don't change these values too much, unless your green screen's terrible. All right, that looks good so far. I'm gonna switch from status in my drop-down menu, and I am recording this. Change from status in my drop-down menu to screen matte. Much more high resolution looking matte now, right? And also something else that you should do when keying, don't just look at one frame. What looks good at one frame might not necessarily be a good key at another frame, especially if your subject is close to the background and they're casting shadows. Less relevant if we're using green screen on an LED wall, but if you're shooting on more traditional green screens, then it could definitely be an issue. So just take a look. And looking at the screen matte here, this looks pretty all right, to be honest. I don't think it is yet when we look at the final results, but this looks okay. Keylight does a pretty decent job. Let's go ahead and look at the final result. It's okay. If I look at it on transparency, it's okay. A lot of the detail on the side of the hair we lose because, this was shot on a very compressed camera and it's an MP4 file, so it's compressed twice. MP4 files use 8-bit color, which means they only use 16 million colors instead of 46 billion that are in RAW files. You also get a lot of green screen fringe around the edge here. But it's all right, I can live with this. It is what it is. It's very compressed. This is where I can start to play around with the clip black and clip white, and also play around with some of these other settings like the shrink and the grow and the softness. Some of these are pretty self-explanatory. Let me go back to the screen matte real quick. Clip black is going to start to eat into the side of her hair. It cleans up the green screen at the expense of her hair. I'm not sure we need to do much of this at all, to be honest. I guess I picked a good pixel. Whoever told me to pick right there, it's a good spot. Clip white does the opposite. If I go back to 100 here, you can see there's a couple pixels. It's hard to see on the projector, but there's a couple pixels right here that are a little gray. And I look at the final result. maybe that's her actual hair, but maybe it's a little see-through. If I wanted to make that more white, I could bring down the clip white, and then, you know, it whites out all that area. But now it's going to look not great because I cranked the setting. You know, now it doesn't look good at all. It's very chunky, right? So it's all about finesse with this. And, you know, I kind of got lucky with this example. It's almost like I picked it for the demo on purpose. With these numbers. In your case, it's going to be different. Every single picture is going to be different, depending on the green screen that it was shot on, and the camera it was shot on, and just your settings and your skill level. So dial in the settings till it looks good, and then go to final result. Softness is how soft the matte is. It's hard to tell when we look at the final result, but if I look at screen matte, you can see that it just feathers the edge, right? Sometimes this can help with like chatter on the background, flickering of pixels, especially if you're not using a good camera. But again, it comes at the expense of the detail in her hair. See, look at the difference. And a lot of this is, it's just about making your peace with it. Like, I want to get rid of the chatter, but I don't want to lose a lot of detail in the hair. You have to kind of just pick one and decide what looks good. Also, never, ever, ever is she going to be composited onto solid black or solid red, unless you're making a film about the color solid red that people stand in front of. Then maybe your film is about that. It's probably going to be some busy background that she's against, right? And then it looks fine because it's a busy background and nobody's going to notice, right? The worst thing that you can composite someone on top of is a solid color without any sort of busyness happening. So you should not composite your footage in a vacuum necessarily. In our case right now, we're keying it out and then bringing it over into Unreal. But when you do your final composite and you bring your foreground and your background from Unreal back into After Effects, you might go back into your color key and finesse it because now you have the background that it's going to be composited into, right? And you can make adjustments from there to make it look good on the background that it was intended for. If it does look good on solid color red or solid color white and black, then it should hypothetically look good on anything. But just keep in mind that ultimately you're compositing them into a scene. So it makes sense to color key them with settings that make them look good in that scene. Or you're just making life hard for yourself. You know, like if your background is really, really busy and you're tearing, no pun intended, but you're tearing your hair out trying to key out the hair, dude, just put your background and you're probably not even going to notice half the things that you're freaking out about. And if you don't notice it, nobody else is going to notice it. So just chill. It'll be all right. Huh? Other things that I suggest doing, change the replace method. In After Effects, I usually like to do this. I like to change it to source. This does bring back some green screen spill, which is hard to see on the projector. It shows up on my laptop though. And I like to use this effect called the advanced spill suppressor. Not the spill suppressor, but the advanced spill suppressor, because we're advanced, not obsolete. Advanced spill suppressor, drag that on top. And I like to change this method to ultra instead of standard. And usually I don't even have to change any of these settings most of the time. And it just cleans up the green screen right away. If I took off the green screen, you can see that it's not green anymore. It's been de-spilled by that effect. And now we can composite her into a magical wonderland. I don't even know who this woman is, but I've been using her to do demos for years. Thank you. Questions? Oh, that was very fast. Keying is pretty easy if your green screen is decent. Uh, easy to do, difficult to master, I would say. Like getting it really perfect could be excruciating, but getting it in the ballpark is you can do it pretty fast. No question? You all know how to key? A lot of you said you never keyed before. We'll see. What? You really want in this class, don't you? Well, I like you. We should sacrifice somebody else. This is going to be the hardest class you're ever going to take. Somebody else drop the class. 8 minutes. Let me do a little 8-minute taste test in. Oh well, okay. You have to render her out then. So we got to go to composition, add to render queue. Down bottom here, you want to change. Click on the output mode. Change this to PNG because we're bringing it over into Unreal. This is basically how we're getting from here to where we did Miley and the cat. Another thing to think about is, see right here, this is a 16:9 aspect ratio. If I brought this over into Unreal, the plane that we're putting the picture on is 1:1. The texture aspect ratio, if I exported it from After Effects as 16:9, is different than the square aspect ratio that I'm putting it on in Unreal. So it's going to be skewed, right? So you have two options. You could either render this out as a square, just enlarge the composition so it's square, or you could change the plane so it's not. I can't do that math. But do 1, 1, 1. And do 16:9. Lock that and change this to. You see, her texture was square originally, and now I'm putting her on a 16:9 plane. So you could change your plane if you're rendering out 16:9 to, in this case, 1 by 0.06 is 16:9 aspect ratio. Does that make sense? Or just grab the scale and just move it until it looks not squished. Okay. I would probably suggest changing the composition to a square. So right-clicking on composition, or starting with a square composition before you import your video, and changing the height to be square. So 1920 by 1920. So now it's a square. I render out a square. And all this stuff's, all the black stuff's going to be invisible, so you won't see, it won't matter. All right, add to render queue. Output module, change format to PNG. Again, EXR would be better, but we haven't really talked about that. Channel, change, this is very important, change this to RGB alpha. RGB is just going to put her on black when it renders out. Click OK. Choose where you want to output to. New folder, frozen computer. A lot of interesting folder names there. Now, making a new folder crashes my computer, but Unreal doesn't. Whatever, I'll just put it in this folder. File organization, right? That was the first thing I said today. I'm already throwing that out the window. Render. So, what? That was on my desktop. Some other folder called text. There it is. So it's rendering slow. So these are the files that I could use in Unreal then. Just like the Miley and cat moves. So, what you have been tasked with doing for next week one, I would like 1 to 3 people that are willing to not make a fool out of themselves in front of everybody else in front of the LED wall, but, you know, be an actor. Just same thing, I guess. That would be useful. And then 2, make some sort of Unreal world. Take some sort of green screen footage and put them together and render it out from Unreal. So getting getting this video essentially is what your job is. You're not allowed to use Miley the cat because it's already been keyed up. But there's other green screen footage that I gave you in that zip, or you can use your own. Next week, we'll all have green screen footage that we'll shoot. Okay? Questions? No questions. All right. That's all. If you want to stick around for like 15 minutes, I could give a little Resolve demo, but it's not part of class. And for those of you that can't stick around, I can post the link to that demo that you could watch. I won't judge you if you can't stay. And we'll just keep this recording. Okay. Well, if you have to go, you have to go, but I'm just going to go through this. Because I said I would, but I took too long. So DaVinci Resolve is free software from Blackmagic. Blackmagic makes cameras. Oh, this is probably a camera that that shoots Blackmagic RAW, 12-bit color, 12K resolution. Do not shoot 12K resolution. I will fail you. It's unnecessary. You don't really need to shoot above 4K for this class, honestly. What was I saying? Yeah, they make cameras, but I like their video editing software. It's much faster than Premiere, in my opinion, and I highly suggest that you start using it. It's my main suggestion in this class. I have this footage from the Diplo shoot, the Diplo Charlie XCX shoot that we looked at in the beginning of class. It's like a 2-second clip, green screen. Oh, After Effects finished rendering. Now we have that done. I'm going to key this out in 2 different ways and show you. Oh yeah, it's still recording. Cool. So I'm not going to go super deep into like Resolve 101. This is kind of a taste test of oh wow, that's a lot better than After Effects. Maybe I should check that out on my own time, sort of thing. All right. So here's the timeline. Actually, let me delete all these. It's an old project. Here's a timeline in Resolve, same idea as Premiere. This footage is a little noisy, to be honest. Not the easiest to key, surprisingly, even though this shoot had like $80,000 all-in budget, but whatever. But that's okay. So the first method I'm going to show you to key this out is just using effects like in Premiere. Now we're going to use, I guess it's an open FX effect. We're going to use something called the 3D keyer, kind of just like Keylight. So I take this and I start drawing on here what I want to get rid of. Done. Same sort of problems. You know, we got that noise in the top. Of course, the table is a different color green, but we can add to the key, or actually, whoops, that. We can subtract from the key. Let's do that again. Let me just be aggressive about it. You know what? Let's just go crazy at the expense of the hair. If I was to do, well, I did do this. I did all of the effects for that. Hey, how about that? If I was to do this a shot again, I would do it like I did the first time. Not like I'm going to do in class right now, but I would break this into two pieces. I would cut this, I would put a mask and basically cut this into the table and his hand, and I would turn it into the rest. A lot of times when I'm keying out, I will put a mask around their hair and do their body separately from their hair, just because it's different settings. I need to be less aggressive with the hair than I am with the rest of the body. I need to be a little bit softer with it, right? In this case, I was pretty aggressive just now with what I did. And it's a little chunky here, but I haven't adjusted anything yet. First thing, maybe I'll play with the despill. Oh, it looks pretty good. A little noisy maybe, but also I'm super zoomed in. I'm 300% zoomed in. You're never going to see it this close. Again, you need to remember, one, what background is it going on, and where are people looking at it? You know, if it's something that's on a billboard far away, nobody's going to be up close to it, then you can get away with things that you couldn't necessarily. Then if, you know, if this is like a L'Oreal hair ad and you're up close on the hair, then obviously you need to just pay more attention to the hair. But dude, this is 100% right here. Are people really going to see that? Probably not. So don't drive yourself nuts about things. With that being said, how about we just drive ourselves a little bit nuts? So I'm going to click on some of these settings that I can play around with. The matte finesse. Play with the pre-filter a little bit. I mean, I'll blur it a tiny bit. Just make it a little less chunky. I can play with the in and out, just suck in and out if I wanted to. Click on here. I can do the post filter. Just clean it up a little bit. I think that looks pretty darn good, to be honest. And believe me when I tell you this, and I'm not just being a fanboy right now. If I was to do this in After Effects, it's much more chunky looking. It takes a lot more work. If I put this against a solid color. Oops. Quick key, I would spend more time with it, and we haven't even approached the bottom yet. If I was to do this, again, I'm not going to do it now because it would take too much time, but I would cut this image essentially in half, where I would you know, crop it from the bottom. Maybe I am going to do it right now. And then I would copy it. Oops. Hate doing video editing on a laptop. I would copy it. I would turn that one off, turn that one on, and then I would change the cropping. Oops, not the softness, the cropping. From the bottom, so the bottom, I would do this from the top. Boom. Good enough for right now. No, not even close, actually. I would dial in my numbers to make sure that I got the exact right seam. But now I have two independent pieces that I could key separately, right? Just need to work on that seam, but that's because I'm not dialing them in very well. So that's the bottom. So let's reset that key light effect, and let's rekey just the table. Also, I have a shadow to deal with too. So now I've done the table. I just need to work a little bit better on my crop. Well, I think you can see where this is going, but it's not a trivial thing to dial this in right away. But I essentially have broken it into two pieces. You can understand that, right? And to get a good key. The thing that you might all be interested in, though, is using this newfangled thing called Fusion. So Fusion is built into Resolve. There's also like a $300 version of Fusion that you own in perpetuity, but this is the light version that just doesn't include some camera tracking stuff and like higher than 4K, I think, that sort of thing. But if I select my footage here and go to Fusion, I get this crazy window that is node-based. Pro compositing is node-based. It's not layer-based like After Effects. That's not to say that you can't do great things with layer-based compositing. It's just nodes offer you a lot more flexibility and power. So if I was to click here, there's all sorts of different tools that I can use. And again, this is not a Resolve 101 class. It's kind of just a show and tell. And then, you know, if you're into it, check it out a little bit more deep. I can point you in the right direction. In Fusion, I have two different windows that I can put up next to each other. And I can look at separate things independently. Instead of layers which stack on top of each other where it can be hard to connect and get a tracking mat from one layer to put on another piece, the nodes allow me to grab things that I've done before and include them at different parts of the composite hierarchy. So here I'm going to use my delta keyer, which is just the name of one of the keyers in Resolve. And I'm going to key it out. Delta keyer is much more powerful. Oh, it's pretty darn good right there. Look at the alpha of it. Not so good when I look at the alpha of it. Play around with the range here. Threshold, dial that up, get rid of the black, dial this down. It's a little chunky there. Fringe, spill method. Let's change this out of alpha. Looks pretty good. You can also do things like, you know, that, you know, if I only wanted to key that one area of him, I could put a polygon mask around his body. It doesn't move that much, so it's good enough. And I can use this as a mat to get rid of everything that is not important, like the edges of my frame. You can do this in After Effects too as well, but I'm just doing it on a node graph here. And the reason that this looks, I want to get rid of the opposite. Garbage mat. So there's a lot of different inputs and outputs that you can put it into here. The garbage mat gets rid of the garbage. It's basically a mask that, you know, get rid of the garbage, which is the edges of my frame in this case. And we can plug it in. So I think it's a better keyer. Nodes are a little tricky to learn, mostly just because of the interface and like learning the terminology, and especially when you have used After Effects so long, it's really easy to just do that in your sleep. But I just think you have a lot more power with Resolve, not to mention Fusion. I feel like it performs a lot better with GPU acceleration, whereas After Effects and Premiere can bog down really fast. I mean, look at this. If I just opened, I don't know, if I take this and I make a new composition of it, this is not a good example. Make a new composition from this footage. Sometimes it can just not even play at the proper frame rate. It just chugs along. So my suggestion, if you have time, you check out Resolve. If you're interested, even just for video editing, you don't even have to use the nodes at all. It's not something that we're going to be required to use in here at all. But since this is a compositing class, I wanted to show you at least one tool that is free that can give you a little bit more power. This could be really crazy, actually, this whole node graph. Unfortunately, I don't have a picture of one of the crazier ones that I've worked on. We could fill this entire thing with nodes. And if you like spaghetti wires and stuff for Max MSP, this might be right up your alley of compositing. Any questions about this? This was not kind of an afterthought, but could be interesting. No? I try to use this method of compositing on everything I do now, just because I feel like I have more power. And you can also do 3D camera tracking directly in here. You can bring 3D models in here. You don't have to do like the weird C4D composition dance that you do with After Effects. So it's a poor man's nuke. This is what it is. Someday I'll learn nuke. But happy to talk about that more for anybody that's actually interested. But you know, it's not something that's required for this class, so I just show and tell, and that's pretty much it. Web, what do you think about Resolve?
I think it's like really competitive.
It's also free. That's a ringing endorsement.